Welcome back to the program. Matthias Cormann and Craig Emerson are my guests this morning. We do know that Labor MPs, especially in New South Wales and Queensland, are under a lot of pressure over the proposed gambling reforms that the government has put forward. Today we've learnt that the Attorney-General, Robert McClellan, told his local newspaper in southern Sydney that his personal view is that clubs are justified to be seeking additional information, that the mandatory pre-commitment scheme will be effective, and he said, "I am seeking a longer transitional period." This morning, in a statement to Sky News, the Attorney-General has confirmed that, yes, he does back these gambling reforms. He says he's a big supporter of the clubs, but he's also a big supporter of methods to try to tackle problem gambling. Craig Emerson, these sorts of comments, and it's not the first time we've heard queries and concerns raised about the gambling reforms from Labor MPs. It doesn't help the Prime Minister's case, does it, when she's already facing such staunch opposition from the Coalition, from Clubs Australia, from the NRL, the list does go on.
And not from the AFL, as it's been clarified. I'm not saying that no clubs in Victoria have concerns about these, but we do need to put in place reforms to deal with the problem of problem gambling.
That's something everyone agrees with, but on the Attorney-General's comments...
They do, but then when we start putting up proposals, people say, well, we don't like that. And it'll be ineffective, so don't do it. And what we need to do is have a full productive engagement with the clubs. Robert and I and all other members of Parliament, both sides of Parliament, fully acknowledge the great role that clubs perform. Our RSL clubs, our leagues clubs, in promoting junior sport, in being part of the community, we recognise that. But we need also to recognise that on average problem gamblers lose $21,000 a year. That's a big hit on family budgets.
Would you like
after
to see
tax.
a trial of this reform, though?
We're open to a trial. We're open to a trial, but it needs clubs and states to put their hands up.
Do you think a trial will be likely?
Well, let's have a productive engagement with clubs, with some of the state governments. Some might be less happy to engage with the federal Labor government than others, but that's a matter for them. Let's have the debate, but let's not pretend, and I'm not saying that clubs are pretending, that there's no issue of problem gambling here. It smashes families. And we need to do something about it that is effective, and that is beyond saying, oh, yes, well, we're concerned about problem gambling too.
What's your understanding of Andrew Wilkie's position when it comes to a trial? Is that something that you've discussed?
Well, I'm just saying that we're open to the idea of a trial, but that needs clubs and it needs states to put their hands up for it.
What sort of trial period could work?
I'm not going to start designing, it's a good question, but I'm not going to design a trial here on Sky Agenda, as important as the program is. But yes, we want it to work, but we're not going to put our heads in the sand on what is a very big social problem.
Is that welcome news to you, Matthias Cormann, that the government is open and opening the door to have a trial on these gambling reforms? If the trial was implemented and it worked, could that then mean that the Coalition would support the move?
Well, as a general point, we support well-targeted, effective initiatives to address problem gambling. We do not support mandatory pre-commitment. Our assessment is that it will be very expensive and that it won't work. It would certainly stop social gamblers in their tracks. It will have a significant impact on clubs, but it won't actually address problem gambling. And that is, of course, an assessment that many inside the Labor Party share with us. And my view is I actually don't believe that Julia Gillard will ever deliver on her promise to Andrew Wilkie. She'll continue to string him along because that's what she needs to do in order to be able to hold on to power by keeping his support. But I don't think that Julia Gillard has got the political authority within her own caucus to actually press ahead with this.
But Matthias Cormann, the Productivity Commission has acted on this, saying that they think that these sort of recommendations would work. There is a whole lot of research backing up the sorts of ideas put forward by Andrew Wilkie and the Senator Nick Xenophon. If there was a trial of the mandatory pre-commitment technology and it does prove to work, would the Coalition then throw your weight behind this?
Well, I mean, that is very much a hypothetical. What we've said is that we support effective, well-targeted initiatives to address problem gambling. We don't think that mandatory pre-commitment is that. We think it's an expensive way of not addressing the problem. So I certainly haven't seen any research that mandatory pre-commitment is effective in addressing problem gambling. And so, I mean, our position is there clear for all to see.
But surely, Matthias Cormann, if this is going to go ahead, you would prefer it goes ahead as a trial?
Well, we certainly don't think that the government should press ahead with mandatory pre-commitment full stop, as Julia Gillard has promised to Andrew Wilkie. Our view is that we need to go for more targeted initiatives that actually focus on addressing problem gambling rather than just targeting social gamblers and hurting clubs across Australia in the process.
You see, this is this ridiculous statement again from the Coalition that mandatory pre-commitment would stop social gambling in its tracks. Now, how on earth would that happen? That you pre-commit to the amount of money that you're prepared to lose, and that means that you wouldn't bet on the poker machines. I mean, it's just such an absurd statement because
Cormann, I'll let you
they
respond to that
just
quickly, and I do
oppose
want to move
absolutely everything. No, 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 and no.
Matthias Cormann?
Sorry?
What is the basis
behind
actually saying something? Well, was Craig Emerson actually saying something? I just heard him sort of spread some political rhetoric, but I didn't actually hear him saying anything.
Okay, we are running out of time. Let's move on. The news poll analysis today. It isn't a new poll, but it is a quarterly analysis of the state of play. It shows that Labor would lose more than half its seats in New South Wales, including 4 ministers. It shows an electoral wipeout in Queensland with Kevin Rudd, the only person left standing. That means my guest Craig Emerson, who hails from Queensland, of course, would be included in that if an election was held today. It shows that now in all mainland states, including Victoria and South Australia, which stood pretty strong for Labor at the last election, well, the primary vote is now below 30 in most of those states, excluding Victoria. The state of play obviously very devastating for Labor at the moment. As these poll numbers keep coming out, we see more and more speculation about the Labor leadership. Yesterday on Sky News PM Agenda with David Spears, we were chatting with Bruce Hawker, the Labor strategist, and he said that there is a case for changing leaders. Have a listen.
You can make the case for a change in leadership. Obviously, I mean, changes in leadership happen quite regularly on both sides of politics these days. So, and if you are really trailing in the election, then that's a big plus.
Craig Emerson, this is a man who's worked on more elections, state and federal, than most on your side of politics. For someone like that to waver off the script and say that, yes, there could be a case for leadership, what does that signal to you?
Well, I think there's a model that we should not replicate, and that's the New South Wales merry-go-round model. So Bruce Hawker's wrong?
There's no case for leadership,
there's no
leadership
case,
change?
No case whatsoever. We have a very strong and determined leader who is determined to govern in the national interest. And yes, that does mean that from time to time you'll take a hit in the polls. That does mean that. It has always meant that. And if you go through the last 25 years of Hawke, Keating and Howard, you will find periods where they've been well behind in the polls. And on no occasion, and I'll mention Howard favourably here, did he then say, that's it, let's give up, we're not going to do any more hard economic decision making, we'll just roll out of bed, check the polls and see what the people want and give it to them.
Well, a former Labor leader, Mark Latham, had some thoughts on this on Paul Murray Live last night. Have a listen.
Maybe it is at the point where your Shortens and your Hawkers and others are acknowledging, well, yes, we have got to the point where she's got no return game. She's not going to survive. The next step is to work out, well, who takes over. And it's probably coming a bit too early for our mate Kevin, in that he is suited to a late switch scenario closer to the next election. If there is a first move for a Stephen Smith, maybe that's who they galvanise their support around.
Senator, of course, we've heard Labor blaming the Coalition for stirring up this leadership chatter, but when it came down to it, do you think that your job to win the next election would be made a whole lot harder if Kevin Rudd was returned as Labor's leader?
Look, wherever I go around Australia, people are concerned about the direction that this bad government in Canberra is taking the country into. I mean, this is an incompetent government which is led by a bad Prime Minister who, quite frankly, lacks judgment, lacks political authority and is out of her depth. And
yes,
look,
back to my question. Do you think that Kevin Rudd would be a stronger match for Tony Abbott?
I was very interested to hear Craig Emerson's comments about Julia Gillard, because these are exactly the things that he was saying about Kevin Rudd in June last year, of course. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, our job is to hold this government to account. Our job is to offer a better alternative. Who is the leader of the Labour Party is a matter for the Labour Party. But to make just this final point, Labour's fundamental problem is not its leadership. Its fundamental problem is that they're pursuing bad policies which people across Australia just don't want, and which people across Australia were promised they wouldn't get, like the carbon tax, and which people across Australia understand won't do anything. For example, the carbon tax won't do anything for the environment, but will be a significant hit on cost of living pressures and on jobs.
All right, well, some free advice for you there, Craig Emerson from Matthias Cormann this morning.
He just says the same stuff over and over and over again.
I think both sides of politics can be accused of sticking to the script on a number of these issues. We are out of time. Craig Emerson, Matthias Cormann, appreciate your thoughts this morning. Thank you for your company, and thank you to our viewers as well for your company. We do appreciate it this morning, and we'll bring you up to date on any of these stories as they develop throughout the morning. I'll be back with you on AM Agenda tomorrow. Until then, I'm Ashleigh Gillon. Thank you for joining us today.